My name is Patrick Celine. Yeah, my exposure to psychedelics began later in life for me, like not until my 30s. I grew up in a more religious or conservative context, and so I was pretty scared and paranoid about getting caught or, being a bad boy. I wanted to be good, and I wanted to do, the best things and the most wholesome things. Didn't realize what I was missing out on until I got to my 30s, but it was a really nice experience to taste life in a really full way, sober, to come into the psychedelic realm with a lot of clarity and a lot of innocence in many ways, in order to just have like a really raw and like paradigm shifting experience from what I'd really established and lived up until that point. Yeah. So the first psychedelic was grandmother ayahuasca, straight to the grandmother. Psilocybin and peyote, and for depending on how we're defining psychedelics, but these fundamental shifts in consciousness, cannabis and MDMA and ketamine have all been, a part of the apothecary. Yeah, so before the psychedelic experience, my search for the transcendence was really through religion, was through the Christian church. I wanted to experientially connect with spirit. And as hard as I tried, for 20 some years within that Christian experience in the Christian community, there truly was nothing experiential for me that was touching into a direct experience of God. It felt very mentalized. It felt like I had a lot of great teachings and, beautiful people supporting and offering these wisdom traditions, and as good of a way as they knew how, but it lacked the interiority of someone that had seen the face of God. And I wanted that's what I wanted, and more so I wanted that experience myself. And within religion, the idea is well, you don't get to do that. There's one person who did that for all of us, or those were the priests, and or those were the prophets, or those were these people, and so we just kind of consume their firsthand experience. And I didn't realize how troubling and disempowering and haunting that was to my spirit, because the innocence of the search was to awaken that experience of radical aliveness, which I would have called divinity at the time, but as a human, the experience of just being fully myself, and on the inside of that God experience, that was what I was really after. So it took really from middle school, high school, when I was really consciously invested in the Christian path, it took 25 years to come to a space where I just felt very hopeless and disappointed and disillusioned that all of my effort, all of my best, attempts to be worthy, of such a transmission or such an experience were the actual things that were keeping me from having the experience. So it kind of began as cannabis was just becoming legal at the time, and so I was and I was also married at the time, and I was this is something I'm excited about and interested in. Isn't it cool that this is happening? And that wasn't the sentiment of my partner at the time, and so there was a rift at that point. And so cannabis kind of really became the first linchpin issue of how we relate to the substance or the plant medicine itself, was starting to clarify that the spirit in my heart has always been for radical aliveness, interiority of that beautiful, divine experience, whereas here now my partner, who I'm married to at the time, is reflecting back a sense of fear and a sense of mistrust and a sense of kind of wanting to shame that in like that could kind of let God out of the box, you know, like it's not really what we're about. And that for me was like, actually that's exactly what I'm about. And I'm not sure that's this, but if this is a gateway drug into that, I'm willing to take the gateway, because I want the full experience. And so that precipitated into not just a divorce from our partnership, seeing that we had different values that were aligning, but it was a divorce from my Christian identity in the Christian community at the time, and plugging in not just to the psychedelic community, but the embodiment community. So I spent a lot of time at the yoga studio and spent a lot of time out in nature, and the plant medicines, the entheogens, seem to be good friends of the natural mystics. This feels almost like generalized amongst the ayahuascans, those that have had it. It's like you don't find ayahuasca, she finds you. It's like, ooh, spooky or interesting, or like, how's that actually happen? But that was my experience. There was like a curiosity and a resonance, and so I started to study, just do Google searches, find some credible sources that were speaking about ayahuasca, what's the experience like. And so I just started to immerse myself in my desire, honestly. And that desire, meeting with the resonance of the idea of ayahuasca, started to bring the conversations into consciousness. I started to be willing to hear and to listen. And this is really, I think, like the beginning of the medicine. So before you're even with the psychedelic, it's already starting to do its work on you, would be one way of saying it. And so I went to a festival, and there were some people that, you know, were dieting on ayahuasca. And I just remember seeing them and seeing their, like, you know, Peruvian beadwork and like all these things. I've like, you know, coming from where I was, I've never seen anything like this before, but this is so like pretty. Like, you know, like wanting to touch it and stuff, and they're just smiling and like glowing the whole time. And I'm like, can I try this on? And they're like, yeah. And so like we're having this conversation, and they're like, so when's the last time you've sat with ayahuasca? And I was like, I've never sat with ayahuasca. And they just kind of turned, and they're like looking at me wearing the stuff, and they're like, you look the part, bro. Like, you know, not just you look the part, but like the, you know, the spirit of the medicine feels present. It feels like you have already sat with this medicine based on our experience of the medicine. So that was kind of like a first like little synchronicity, and a hint that I, like, who I thought I was might not be the fullness of who I was becoming. And then I went to this harvest party, and within like 2 sentences of meeting this guy, brand new relationship, he's like, do you want to sit with ayahuasca? And younger than me, and just kind of like really, you know, like just clear. And I'm like, what'd you just say? And he's like, I'm just like kind of poking around. He's like, I was curious if you've ever sat with ayahuasca. And I'm like, that's not what you said. You asked if I wanted to sit. And he's like, that is what I asked. And I was like, it feels like a yes, you know, to do that. And so it was just like odd, right, that it would like transpire so quickly. Like, why is that cocktail conversation at this, you know, this harvest party? But it really aligned with me that I was ready for the moment to say yes, and it came to me. I'm seeing the image of myself after my first purge with the ayahuasca medicine. The purge, if you haven't purged before, that can be physical, or it can be emotional, it can be psychological, through, you know, beliefs or thoughts that are starting to like leak themselves out. But for me, it was kind of all of it, physical as well. So I was sitting there like with my wellness in front of me in the bucket, and just like looking into this, and being so grateful, one, just to be done with that part of the process, and of course being in circle and realizing like this isn't weird that I'm like hanging out with people, just vomiting my like old energetics, my old, feelings of life and self, and like here we are, and like everyone's just like kind of like meditating and like doing their own thing and like receiving these songs. And I was like, how immensely beautiful is this sacred space where it's like the darkness is the gift, and to be aware of that helped bring this idea that I'm the light in this darkness. And it just shifted to a place where everything I thought I was coming to the psychedelic experience for, my list of things I had to fix, the things that I wanted to like manifest, were just like, it was like a penny I like flicked into the well at the start of the process, but then after this full experience, I was drinking from the well itself. I wasn't just like offering, manifestation ideas. I was the manifestation of the light that I had always projected onto Jesus or projected onto other heroes. I was experiencing my light in the midst of my own vulnerability to deal with my shit. And I remember at that point, it was an almost full moon, so it was waxing, and the energy of the full moon was just super palpable that night. That wasn't something that I was particularly attuned to for most of my life, and I don't think it was particular to the psychedelics, but it was just, the volume was really turned up, of course, at that moment. I just remember like looking out the window and seeing the moonlight and just seeing how beautiful everything was, lit up in like that silver glow, and just feeling how I was like as present with the light on the tree as though I was like the presence of that light, and then feeling that presence come back. And so there's just this very palpable, thick, beautiful presence that felt like I'm just fully here. So all those questions, like being on this side of the equal sign of like an unsolvable problem, I was just the answer. And so the question just fell away. And so I'm like, oh, so this is what I am, who I am, feels like. That's the statement of God, right? On Mount Sinai, it's like, Moses asked, like, who should I say sent me? Tell him, I am sent you. And it was as simple and as beautiful as that. I was just there and present, and that the thread of, so in that experience, I wasn't like seeing jaguars and grandma come out of the jungle in some like anaconda robe or something. For me, others can have visuals, and I think the psyche will work with what it does in the same way it does in the dream realm. Anything that can communicate the energy of our being to us will occur, both in the dream world and I think also in the dream world of our waking life. Same thing. Like we're gonna get the messages however we can get the messages. My message wasn't fractals of rainbow light, it was presence. It was just like, there's nothing actually different about this moment than the rest of my life. I just wasn't aware of the simplicity of what it feels like to be simply me, or even just take the me out of it, just to simply be. Saying yes to ayahuasca began an initiation that was coming from a deeper part of myself than I had identified with at the time. My mind and like my doubts or my cautions, were more familiar at the time, more conscious for me. And so I kind of like identified with, well, what are my reasons for being so cautious? And here's who I think I am. But I was actively dismantling this at this point in my life. And so the experience leading up to ayahuasca was really standing in the mirror of my shadow and starting to feel all the feelings that I protected myself from feeling. And at first, I like to think about that, like when we turn to face our shadow for the first time, we turn away from like the sun or the light of our culture, our conditioning, or our ego of like guiding us into some version of ourselves. And when we turn and face our shadow, we're facing the darkest part of the shadow first, which is almost like cruel in some way. Like in the medicine path, it's like, can't we start off slow and then get to the big stuff? And it's like, that's not how it worked for me. And I know that there's ways, like with microdosing and the set and setting can help ease you into this space. But at the same time, I was ready for the deep end of the pool. And so that energy was my experience perceptually leading up to ayahuasca. So there's a lot of doubting myself. There was a lot of, can I trust others? Can I trust these people? Can I trust this dude that came up to me that's sponsoring me and taking me? Like so many doubts. And what I was realizing was, that's not just about ayahuasca, that's about me. That's what I'm carrying inside of me. And it's starting to become really conscious and really real. And so that felt like my body having like temperature shifts. It felt like becoming conscious of tension that I was carrying and a fear of just speaking my needs. So everything really just started to unfurl by the time that I got to the space that we were going to be sitting in ceremony. I remember like looking around and looking at all these people and judging them and being like, you guys just crawled out of the forest, you know? It's like you're like Ewoks and you're like dressed like no one I've ever seen. And, you know, like I'm coming out of Portland, a city boy, and like, you know, it's like I know how to put on Wranglers and stuff and like work in the farm, but I'm like, what are these hats? And like, what are all these you know, like the jewelry and stuff. And I just realized throughout it was a two night sit, so 2 separate times of being with the medicine and in circle together, that I was judging myself. I was like, and like remember back at the festival, like part of you delights in like dressing, you could call it hippie or earthy or Gaian or whatever, but I was longing for this deeper connection with earth, deeper connection with myself, and these people were wearing it and, you know, showing it. So those are just some examples of like coming into any psychedelic space, we're bringing ourselves and we're bringing our unconscious material, and anytime we're willing to do that, we're going to confront ourselves. So there's that at least happening. There's the relationship between myself and myself. Then there's the relationship of like myself and others, and then my relationship with this medicine, this psychedelic that I'm going to commune with. So all of it's kind of the medicine. That's the conduit. That path through, you know, the bravery of stepping into that psychedelic space for me led me into a lineage of medicine that's psychedelic in some ways, but it's breath, and breathwork has become as much of my psychedelic and my medicine path as any of the other medicines that are available. And to have that first experience of humility and also like audacity, you know, to be, you know, like have ayahuasca available in the West at this point. It's like we're alive. It's such a monumental time, and to step into that space, to give myself that experience, and then to be led back to what is kind of like a noble, holy kind of thing. It's like I can have a psychedelic experience just with my breath. It's like, man, you could have been doing that back in the church, but you would have been a different person doing the breath work. You would have been a different person for sure, because you weren't allowed to, you know, put yourself in a place of reproach is how it would have been said, right? Like, be beyond reproach. Don't put yourself in a space where you're going to be seen a certain way. And it's like you're just ultimately afraid of yourself, confronting your true, not just your true shadows, but also your true desires. And I think that was kind of a full circle of experience to realize that I was avoiding the simplicity of, you know, just being who I was. I didn't need to be afraid or demonize the psychedelics anymore than I needed to demonize my breath. Yes, psychedelics have changed my life. And I would say that psychedelics have revealed my life to me, that I am my life. There's no separation from me and my ideal life. It has shown me that the two are inseparable.
Thanks for watching. I hope that this story was moving, informative, and empowering. If you're curious on how psychedelics could impact your life, please visit the link below.